What's up, fellow traders? Travis here, and we are heading into a shortened trading week due to Memorial Day weekend. So I've got a lot of thoughts about the markets. Technically, right now, I'm leaning bearish a little bit, at least that's where I'm positioned. And I want to run through my thoughts for how this week might play out for my own benefit and hopefully your own. Okay, gang, the first thing I want to cover here is QQQ, the Nasdaq ETF. And what I'm looking at and what I've seen the most discussed online as the most probable scenario is that we're coming down and potentially testing this kind of zone here that I have in gray. And it's important because this is we had this gap up, so that would fill that gap. We've got the moving averages kind of coinciding in this pocket, and it just seems like the most logical place for price to go at this point, given all the push and pull we have with tariffs and everything else that's happening, inflation concerns that are trickling down from that, etc. We've run quite far, quite fast, right? We've talked about this in previous videos. So looking at this zone, be a fool not to do it. That said, it almost feels too obvious, right? When everyone is looking at one thing, usually you're best served to at least examine what else could happen. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about here. So obviously we could just go higher from here, right? And never get that retest. That would be painful for many people that have not been able to participate in this rally, particularly larger hedge fund and CTAs and stuff like that. Most retail is already in here. So we are looking at this, trend line as potential support. And it is worth noting that futures opened today on Monday, a market holiday, and went quite a bit higher. So we would be, if everything stays the same right now, we'd be gapping up kind of to where we closed on Thursday. But the other scenarios are that we go down to this zone, and rather than do what everyone thinks we're going to do and bounce up and start going higher again, what if we don't? And that's kind of what I'm considering as one of our scenarios here. And one thing I'm thinking about here is, what if we draw a fib retracement from these lows to the highs? Where would that put us in a potential deeper correct? Maybe we see something like this, where we open up here today, but we dribble down lower, and we come here, and either we could fall, right? We could just keep on going, or we have something where we dribble down lower, we test, we bounce, then fall. Or another alternative, obviously, is we kind of just keep consolidating here and go higher, all-time highs kind of thing. So there are multiple scenarios that work here. And I think this is where a lot of people get in trouble. They say, well, are you bearish? Are you bullish? I don't know. Right now, I think you kind of have to be cautious, just given the headline risk that we see. 50% tariffs on the European Union on Friday, roll them back, yesterday, or this morning. And it's like, okay, how much of that can we really trade around? It's just the environment we're in right now, and you have to be careful. So I'm not trying to look too far ahead on anything, but I do feel that A, we've gone very far very quickly. B, we still have tariff risk. The 90-day punt, we've got to be about halfway through it right now. This extension with the EU is going to July 9th. So until there's a conclusion here, there's still a lot of uncertainty. And with that comes risk. Now, I also want to look at the Nasdaq futures because that picture looks quite a bit different. We have the same trend line support. If we zoom out, the same lows we touched. The point is, we were in this range, and I've spoken about this range a lot on Twitter. Said until this breaks, we're just in this no man's chop zone, right? And it broke down on Friday with the news, along with this trend line. And we've obviously pulled back into that zone with the kind of rollback of, hey, just kidding, we're not going to tariff the EU quite yet, we're going to give them some time to talk to us, et cetera, et cetera. The point is, a lot of this range kind of broke down. Unless we get another push higher through here, we're at risk of going lower, right? So I still think that it all kind of aligns to potentially lower prices. I do like the 32, I think it's, or 35.2% fib retracement. That would put QQQ at somewhere around 473. And then it's like, okay, if that happens, what next? Do we go even lower? Do we bounce from there? If we bounce from there, do we bounce and hit the 200-day moving average in this cluster, which might be turning down at that point? And this is where, again, I'll say people get too committed to a future narrative. I don't know. I'm taking it one day at a time, maybe 1 week at a time max. And I'm looking at what the market tells me as things unfold. Every minute is data. Every minute is output that you get from the market telling you information. And what you do with that information is totally up to you. And that's what makes a market, of course. So I'm just trying not to get too ahead of myself, right? And looking at all possibilities. If you look at the S&P 500, it's kind of the same thing. You know, we've got a similar obvious retracement, potential retracement area in the 565, 566 region. We've got that gap up, same thing that happened with Nasdaq. And, you know, again, my thinking is very similar in terms of, okay, well, what if we don't get consensus and stop at this level? What if we go a little bit lower? And honestly, I think going lower here is kind of the most painful thing for most people, because everyone seems to be considering that we'll bounce here, or assuming that we'll bounce here. And it just might not happen. So that's kind of how I'm positioned. Understand my bias right now is bearish. My portfolio's positioned that way. I've got puts in several names. You see them up here. I can do individual videos on these, but I'm short Bitcoin. I've got Palantir puts, MicroStrategy shorts, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I have a bias just like anybody else. What would kind of destroy that bias for me is if we pushed up through this zone, this upper bound of this range in the futures, and started kind of pushing back through those highs. I'd have to get out. You know, I'd be wrong, at least for that moment, and that's enough to kind of say, hey, maybe I'm right later, but now's not that time to be short and kind of follow the trend. So that's how I've positioned this week. It's going to be a shorter week, and hopefully we get some direction so we can at least trade one way or the other with some confidence. And I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.